Calling all Superman cosplayers. Hi everyone, my name's TJ, and I'm a fan of the All-Star Superfan podcast, and since I don't have a Signal watch, I'm just going to use social media. Let's all use the upcoming Superman movie opening, July 11th, 12th, and 13th, to raise funds for the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. You can contact your local movie theater and let them know you'd like to volunteer to be in their lobby as the Man of Steel on opening weekend. You can volunteer as much as you're able. Every hour you give can make a real difference to someone in need. The Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation is 100% on board and is going to be supplying us with an official digital link that people can use to donate directly to the foundation, so you don't need to worry about handling any money. You can invite your friends and fellow cosplayers to join you as Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lex Luthor, and other DC characters. And you are not alone. Alan posted a link to the Facebook event, Superman 25, in the All-Star Superfan Podcast Facebook group. The event is there so we can all work together and help each other to achieve this once-in-a-lifetime feat. We might not be able to bend steel in our bare hands or change the course of mighty rivers, but together we can have Superman's greatest ability, to give others hope and a better tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
We talk Superman, and we know what's happening. We talk Superman, and we cover everything.
Up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's another episode of All-Star Superfan. I'm Alan Burke, and joining me as always is my super-powered partner in crime, Rob O'Connor, as we dive deep into a story that takes the Man of Steel back to his roots while tackling themes that are more relevant than ever. It's bold, it's powerful, it's Superman Smashes the Klan. Gene Luen Yang and Gurahiro's brilliant reimagining of a 1940s radio drama that pitted Superman against real-world hate. We'll be breaking down how this modern comic adaptation honours the original 1946 serial, the adventures of Superman, the Clan of the Fiery Cross, and how it uses the medium of comics to explore racism, identity, and what it truly means to be Superman. It's heartfelt, it's heroic, and spoiler alert, it might just be one of the most important Superman stories of the 21st century. So strap in, cape up, and join us as we smash through some walls of our own. This is All-Star Superfan.
For breakfast, Kellogg's Pep, and for adventure, the adventures of Superman.
I have to say, in preparation for this episode, for those who don't know, we did cover the Clan of the Fiery Cross, the 1946 radio serial, in episode 20 of All-Star Superman with Michael Bailey. And I did listen back to it a few days ago in preparation for this, and I was reminded of the Kellogg's Pep commercials that I heard maybe 4 times a day for 2 weeks while I was listening to those 16 episodes. And your incredible impersonation of that narrator, I loved it.
It's one of my favourite and one of my least favourite things about the radio show is how much you have to listen to people talk about Kellogg's Pep. That was a great episode, and I think at the time we had planned to do that with Michael. It just never came about, so we're finally getting to this story. And I'm really excited to talk about it.
Anything else happening with you lately, Rob, since we last recorded? I know you've made some purchases over the last while.
Yeah, so we're on the home stretch as we were the last time, Alan. At time of recording, we are, holy cats, we are a week and a half away from the release of the movie, man. Crazy. And, I think last time we recorded, you said something like, I'm not really seeing anything out and about in Ireland about the movie yet. And I made a point of deleting that because I knew that by the time it went out, the place would be covered and stuff. And sure enough, like I was in Dublin this weekend and there's a beautiful mural on Drury Street, Summer of Superman, and you can go and take a photo with it. And it's got the Superman cape and it's got this QR code that takes you to the website and everything else. I took a photo of that, and then I was so buzzed off the back of that I went to this shop in Stephen's Green Shopping Centre called Retro Nation, which is just one of these kind of merchandise tat type shops where you can buy Funkos and mugs and posters and things. And they had literally a wall of Superman stuff. They had like loads of Funkos from the new movie, like giant Funkos. They had the Daily Planet mugs from the new movie. I got one of those. They had a fridge magnet bottle opener, which is just the logo. I got one of those as well. It's lovely. The magnet is not very strong. Not too happy about that, but it is a beautiful piece, and I managed to position it in such a way that it doesn't fall. And this is not related to the new movie, but I don't buy Funkos anymore, but I saw this and I was so excited I decided.
Oh, that's cool. The Superman the movie Funko, where he's standing. It kind of reminds me of the Mezco figure that came out a few years ago, where he's standing in his little crystalline control panel. Yeah, that's cool. I haven't picked up too much because, to be honest, I just know if I go into any of these stores, I'm going to spend my mortgage payment for the month. So we were in Dublin a few weeks ago, myself and my wife. We actually bumped into your good self, and I went into Dublin City Comics and Collectibles, and I picked up the McFarlane release of the David Corn Sweat figure, the standard one, not the one with crypto, the one with the rubber cape. So I got that, and I picked up. Now it was actually the T-shirt I was wearing that day. It wasn't. I haven't seen any of the Superman 25 James Gunn Superman T-shirts, but I picked up a kind of a more retro faded Superman T-shirt in a shop we have over here called Sports Direct. I wore it that day. I washed it once, and it shrunk. So that is now my wife's Superman T-shirt, which she can wear to Superman when it comes out, or Supergirl next year, whichever she prefers. But I haven't been into any of the kind of the local toy stores here, Smith's or anything. I haven't seen any of that stuff, but I am eager to go in, maybe bring my daughter in, pick her up a little crypto or something like that. But
sorry, I remembered I do also have this Spin Master figure. Now I was slightly disappointed with this because there is a tiny little crack on the shield that I wasn't very, and this isn't one of the ones that's exposed. It's like it's in plastic, so I don't know why it has this flaw. And I actually contacted Spin Master, which is probably a bit ridiculous because it's like a kid's toy that costs 10 euro. It's not like an expensive premium figure. I contacted them and I was like, look, I'm not too happy about this. Is there any way you could give me another one? Like, knowing full well that they might say no, it costs $10. And they did get back to me, but the oddest response, they were like, we don't have any of those figures left to send you. And they were like, if you would like, we can send you a How to Train Your Dragon Toothless figure. And I was like, no thank you. If you could just do another check and see if you have any Superman figures. It's like the biggest release of the summer. I'm sure you have one lying around, but they never responded. So I'm going to stick with this one.
is it the kind of damage or imperfection that you could fix?
I don't think so. It's so fine and so precise. To be honest, it's the kind of flaw that you probably wouldn't even notice. So maybe we'll just forget about it and display it anyway.
Are they doing the thing? I just see that you have a little Fortress Solitude robot there. Are they doing the thing where every figure you get a little bit of a robot and you put it all together?
Build a robot, baby. So Superman comes with the head and the torso and the cape of the robot, which is fun. And then I think the other figures come with the individual arms and legs, and then the kind of groin, pelvis area. So I feel like it'd be a bit of a bummer to get a figure and it just comes with an arm, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah,
this actually comes with a pretty substantial part of the robot, which is pretty cool. But yeah, no, I kind of do want to build a robot. I want to get all the other ones and build a robot. Now, thus far, I've only seen these on Amazon, and I don't think the full range is even there yet, but I would like to get them all, so hopefully they pop up.
They did that a few years ago with the Ghostbusters. I have them in the display case beside me, where if you collect all the figures, you get a bit of one of the Hellhounds, and you could put the Hellhound together. But I never ended up picking up Dana or Gozer. I still need to pick those up, actually, to finish that. But yeah, so like this will definitely be the last episode we release before the movie comes out, correct?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So have you decided where are you going to watch it?
I'm going to see it in the Odeon IMAX in Blanchardstown, which is up the road from where I live.
Very nice.
It is a chain cinema. I tend to go to the chain cinemas for the IMAX when it's a big release like this. That we tend to go there for most films. Now we go to the Lighthouse Cinema, which is an independent art house cinema in Dublin City Centre. It's kind of subsidised by the Arts Council. It's a really, really beautiful cinema, and it's lovely, and they do these repertory screenings there. I was at Batman Forever there on Saturday. It was an absolutely epic screening. There was a little boy watching it in front of us with his dad, and he was cheering along for the whole movie, and like, you know, when people were kind of quoting the movie, he was quoting the movie. And then there was a bit where Chase Meridian came on and somebody, pointing at myself, like did a big wolf whistle. And the little boy thought this was incredible, and he spent the rest of the movie trying to wolf whistle. It was so funny, right? And then we went to People's Joker afterwards, which is really, really incredible. I'm not going to go into detail about that now, but people check that out if you haven't. But yeah, that's the kind of cinema I like to go to most of the time. But for these big summer blockbuster releases that have been filmed in IMAX, we tend to go to the Odeon. And it's handy because it's kind of a quieter cinema, if that makes sense. Like the ones in town, I always find they're full of idiots on their phones, which just really, really upsets me. And people making noise and stuff like that. I don't mind people cheering and you know, clapping and stuff at the film, but when you're talking in the film or you take out your phone, I just get really frustrated. So I like this one because it's a bit more of like a suburban cinema. So that's where we're going to go see it.
I'm going to see it in the metropolis of Ballinasloe. If anybody knows where Ballinasloe is, it's a small town in Galway in the west of Ireland. But they opened a new Omniplex there, so it's technically my local cinema. So it's a 20-minute drive from the house. I've never been there, and I said I'm going to check it out. But you've highlighted my fear in relation to the film. I am terrified after all this build up that I'm going to go. It's during the summer holidays, and it's just going to be full of kids howling and screeching and playing with their phones and throwing things at each other and all that kind of stuff that you don't want. So I'm going to the 2:30 p.m. show on the 11th.
Okay.
I'm hoping that'll be quite. I'm rolling the dice there because it could be full of kids, or it may not be because, you know, school is out, but there's summer camps and all that kind of stuff on. So I don't know. When I booked the tickets, the seating, they were the only 2 seats that had been booked so far. Now that was about 3 weeks ago, so it could change. I'll have to check it out. But I'm hoping it's going to be a great experience.
When you say kids, though, do you mean like?
Like 15-year-olds, like 15, 16-year-olds, teenagers,
yeah,
you know, just acting the fuck and annoying the shit out of me during my Superman movie.
I agree. Yeah.
No, look, if I go there, man, and it's full of like 8, 9-year-olds who want to see a Superman movie, what better audience could you ask for than that?
Exactly.
No, I'm talking about like the kids hyped up on Monster at 15 years of age with nothing else to do on a Friday. That's what I'm worried about.
You're talking about the likes of Alan Burke when he went to see Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, that guy. I don't want to go to the cinema with that guy. No.
Like to your point there, like I like you. I love going to a film like this, and there's kids there, and they're like screaming and cheering and having a great time. Like we went to the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, I think it was called, a couple of years ago, and that was incredible. That was so much fun, and there was just like really young kids there having a great time, and like, Donatello, he's my favorite, like all this kind of stuff. Like that stuff I love. But when it's people just being dickheads, then, you know, just like I went to Top Gun Maverick. Sorry, old man here. Top Gun Maverick, and there was guys doing fart noises at the back of the screen, and like taking their phones out and playing ringtones, and like, just what is that, you know? So
look, I'm hoping it'll be a great experience. Please God, it will. And I'm really excited. Like when we started recording, well, not when we started recording the episode, but I remember recording episodes, you know, and we'd be talking about, is Henry coming back? Is he not coming back? Who's going to direct it? What's going to happen? And there was nothing definite. And now we are a week and a half out from an actual film experience. And I have to say, I'm not a TikToker. I've left Twitter. I'm not on Snapchat, but I have seen some of the stuff that the cast are posting, you know, these snaps and stuff, and it's just a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun, and they're being real clever about it. Like they're doing like really area specific ones as well. Like we have a lot of listeners in the UK. There was a Coronation Street one yesterday that they were doing.
What?
They were like lip syncing. They were lip syncing to a Coronation Street scene, and I was like, that's so specific to like Ireland and the UK.
Yeah.
So they're really targeting every specific place, which is they're really, really gunning for this movie to be a big hit, you know.
They are on their kind of their world tour at the moment. They're not coming to Ireland, unfortunately. There is a premiere. We haven't been invited to a shock horror, Rob. I don't. To be honest, to be fair to them, I think anybody who's listening to this show is definitely already buying tickets to go and see Superman the movie. It's the influencers and stuff that they're going to be getting.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Most of our listenership is America, and then we have a sizable listenership in the UK and Australia. We don't have many listeners in Ireland, funnily enough. So I don't think Warner Brothers Ireland are that pushed to invite us. But I'd say the reason they're not doing they're doing a big premiere in London, and what they do is they'll fly over the Irish journals there, and they'll do all the interviews and stuff there. But I'm psyched. I'm psyched to see them. I'm psyched to see how people from over here interview them and stuff. And yeah, man, I'm psyched for the movie. I'm not at the level of kind of anxiety-inducing excitement that I was for Man of Steel.
Is that because you've been hurt in the past, Rob?
That's exactly it. I just, you have to go in with a level head to these things now. There's no point. It's better to go, and that's what I went in for the Batman. And I was actually quite a bit less excited for that than I am for this, because we'd had so many great Batman movies. I wasn't, gunning for another one at that stage. But I went into that one kind of very measured expectations. And I really enjoyed it. And then as the years went by, it really, really grew and grew. And now it's like one of my favorite Batman movies. And to me, I think that's probably the best outcome that could happen with this film, is that like go in, enjoy it, and then over time it becomes this beloved film. I don't think I'm going to go in straight away and just be like, oh my God, the world has changed. Amazing. But that might happen.
This is where I'm going to edit it and intercept you telling me, oh yeah, it's the best film I ever saw in my life. Oh my God. I know some other people in the community, like the Geeky Steel and that, are going like 3-4 times in the first day. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go the first day, and then I think maybe a few days later, if it's suitable for my daughter who is almost 6, it may not be. But if it is, I might bring her to an early showing with the, and that'll be nice as well. And if not, I might just go to a night showing myself sometime as well. I'll probably see it 2 or 3 times in the cinematic run. That's my plan. So, Rob, in episode 20, we had a deep dive discussion with Michael Bailey in relation to the Clan of the Fiery Cross, the seminal 1946 radio series 16-part event in which Superman took on basically the Ku Klux Klan. And, we spoke at length in relation to the real-world effects of that story and the importance of that story. And it's a great episode if anybody wants to go back and check out episode 20. We're not going to cover all that again. But we did mention in that episode Superman Smashes the Klan. Which was a comic book adaptation released in 2019-2020 by Gene Luen Yang and Gorohiro, the art team of Sasaki and Kawano. I'm sorry now if I mispronounced any of those names. But we said we'd get to it at some stage maybe with Michael, but we've decided to come back and do it now because, it's one of our favourite books, I think. It's definitely one of my favourite books over the last few years, and I know you hold it in high regard as well. Did you read it back when it came out initially, or how did you first come upon it?
So you might recall, Alan, because we had started the podcast at this stage, I had an emergency appendectomy a couple of years ago.
That's right.
I was in hospital for my appendix, and prior to the surgery, there was a lot of waiting around. That was the worst part. It was just waiting around for hours. You had to fast overnight, and then I was waiting probably 9 or 10 hours before they actually brought me into surgery. So I was waiting around all day, starving, miserable, in pain. So luckily, I had my phone and I had my tablet, and I had heard about Superman Smashes the Klan and how it was apparently great. And I knew it was kind of connected to the radio serial, which at that point I hadn't listened to in probably 10 years or so. I had listened to that whole arc before, but it wasn't really fresh in my mind. And I'm not going to say I was doped up, but I definitely had things to help ease the pain at that stage. But I read it in one sitting, and I was like, this is one of the best Superman comics I've ever read. I just loved it at the time. Absolutely loved it. And it really cheered me up. And I just thought this was so much fun. And yes, you could hand it to like a child. You could hand it to someone, maybe 9 or 10, maybe a bit younger than that. Not too much younger than that. And that they would get, they would get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But I was, in my 30s, and I just thought this is fantastic. It's the best type of Superman story. It's not just an adaptation of the radio serial. There's a lot of additional stuff in there as well, and it makes the story more nuanced, more complex, but it also makes it more fun. Like there's more crashy bashy Superman action in it, and it also is a retelling of the origin, and the way it handled some of those elements, compared to the way other creators have handled some of those elements, really stuck with me this time. I was like, oh yeah, I really, really prefer this. And I think this may have even been a response to some of those other ones, which we'll talk about. And yeah, so I really, really like this book. I loved discovering it the way I did. And it's one of those ones where if someone's like, how do I get into Superman, or how do I get my kid into Superman, I would say that this is one I'd point at pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great, as I forgot over time, I read it when it came out initially, and I hadn't read it since, and I read it last week and I read it again this week. What struck me was, like you said there, it really is a great comic. We've spoken previously about comics you might recommend to someone who just wanted to check out a good Superman book. And it's great for that. It's great, like you said, for people maybe who are 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age, kids who want to get into reading comics. It's even though the themes are very heavy, it's a simple read, and it's a fun read, and it's an exciting read despite all those heavy themes. But also just newcomers in general, like if you were 20, 30, 40 years of age and you were asking, is there a book you'd recommend? I think I would find it hard to beat this. I mean, it really encapsulates exactly what the character is about and was about back, especially in the 40s, when he was more of a
champion of the oppressed.
Yeah, a champion of the oppressed, and taking on corruption and just taking on people who are being sidelined and the downtrodden and all that kind of thing. It's a really great gateway into the character. If you like this, you'll probably like a lot of what Superman books are about in general, I think. I should say this because we spoke about it during the week off mic, and that I kind of struggled with how to approach this book in terms of this episode, because I kept associating it with the radio serial in my mind. And the radio serial, as I said earlier on, is a seminal piece of work. It came out in the 1940s. It blew the doors off the real-life Ku Klux Klan. Stetson Kennedy infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan in real life, and all that kind of information that him and his organization gathered, they fed into the Superman radio show, and it was broadcast across the United States over a number of weeks, and it really just demystified that organization and caused them a great deal of harm. And that's in the real world, which is something absolutely amazing for any story to do, let alone a Superman story. But saying that, I was kind of like, how do we approach this without just repeating everything we said in that episode? And to be fair to you turned to me and said, we'll just talk about the book on its own merits.
Yeah,
it's a very different story to that story, even though it is inspired and takes a lot from it. It's a very fresh take. There's a lot more content in it that wasn't included there, and it's a lot of fun. And if we just concentrate on that, I think that's the way to approach it, because it's just a really enjoyable read.
You're right, it is a lot more fun. There's a lot more kind of fun, cartoony Superman, punchy laser vision kind of kryptonite weapon action in it. So it works on that level. But I also think it makes the whole Clan of the Fiery Cross story more nuanced. It adds more complexity to it. And, because in the original radio show, it's like, this is an innocent Chinese family. And by the way, they're still an innocent Chinese family in this story. That's not where I'm going with this. But you have this innocent Chinese family, and you have the evil cross-burning racists, right? This story really opens up the whole idea of how ignorance and discrimination and racism, it's like a complex spectrum of things. It's not just people burning flags and shooting people and they're the racists, they're the evil guys doing that. There's actually like much milder forms of intolerance and ignorance that are explored in this story, and sometimes that can come from the persecuted people themselves, which we see from the title character of this, I think. And I think it's really, really interesting, and it doesn't do it. I don't think it does it in a preachy way. It does it in a really naturalistic way of like exploring all these different things and how they happen and maybe why they happen, and how we can learn from them, as opposed to just saying, woke culture, nonsense that people come out with. And that's why, again, I think it's a great story for kids, because it doesn't beat you over the head with anything. It just kind of naturally flows throughout the story, and people go on a journey with certain things. And yeah, like I think, whereas I think in the original story, as much as I love it and as important as it was, it is very much that thing of like, oh yeah, the racists are the evil guys who wear the robes and they burn the crosses, and if you're not one of them, you don't really have to worry about that stuff,
And the big difference I found is obviously in the radio show, it's very Clark Kent heavy. It's very, there's a lot of, Clark is doing all his journalism stuff. And we even spoke to it at the time that we love that about it. Like we love when a writer, a director, whatever, focuses on Clark Kent as a journalist. But what I found about this is how Superman's own journey, say, of self-acceptance as an alien mirrors the kid's struggle, especially Roberta's, to embrace her own identity.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a smart way to approach it.
Yes.
on behalf of the writer, that wasn't present at all. Like Superman in the radio serial is the Superman of the 1940s. You know, he's the champion of the oppressed, like you said. But he's, you know, it's me, Superman. It's very two-dimensional.
Off with these clothes.
and
No.
and you know, and brilliantly voiced, obviously by Bud Collyer and that. But in this, it really focuses on the immigrant Superman. You know, we have a Superman here, and we'll get into that, who doesn't know where he comes from, and his story is mirrored by the Lee families, you know, as they move from Chinatown into Metropolis. I thought that was very empowering. I just thought it was a great way to tackle it. So what I might do is I might just give a quick synopsis for anybody who hasn't read the story, who hasn't listened to episode 20 in relation to the Clan of the Fiery Cross. I'll read a quick synopsis and then we'll get into the character elements of it. So Superman Smashes the Klan, set in 1946, Superman Smashes the Klan reimagines a classic radio drama from the adventures of Superman and tells a powerful story about identity, courage, and standing up to hate. When the Lee family, Chinese-American immigrants, move from Chinatown to a suburban neighborhood in Metropolis, they are eager to start a new chapter, but they quickly become the targets of hostility, first subtle, then violent, after young Tommy Lee joins a local baseball team. The situation escalates when a white supremacist group known as the Clan of the Fiery Cross terrorizes the family, trying to drive them out of their home. Meanwhile, Superman himself is grappling with his own identity. Haunted by strange dreams and mysterious flashes of memory, he begins to uncover the truth about his Kryptonian origins, realizing he too is an outsider trying to fit in. As the Klan's threats grow more dangerous, Superman must embrace his alien heritage and fully become the hero the world needs. In doing so, he inspires others, including young Roberta Lee, the brave and observant daughter of the Lee family, who finds her own strength and voice in the face of hate. So that's a character. We'll get into the characters in a second, but that's a character who just did not exist at all in the radio serial Roberta. It was solely focused on Tommy Lee, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I was thinking that when I was reading, and you know, but by the way, I think the radio version is way fresher in my mind now, as I'm sure it is for you. And that was the first thing I noticed was, okay, well, that's a new character. But then the other thing I noticed was any of the radio serial elements of the story are very, very closely adapted in this. It's all the other stuff that's different. So every time we see Tommy Lee and the Unity House baseball team and Chuck Riggs and all these, like, a lot of that dialogue feels, and I'm sorry I didn't go back and listen to it, but it feels very familiar to the old serial, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. They did a great job of integrating the old story, but just adding things into it that don't take away from that original version in any way, shape, or form. Like
Chuck Lee is still called a sorehead in this.
I was laughing there because I know I referenced that a lot in the last episode, and you were laughing at me there, yeah, sorehead. So just to get into some of the characters in relation, I'll let you go first. Your thoughts in relation to Superman Clark Kent himself?
Yeah, I mean, purely on a fanboy level, Clark Kent doesn't feature in this as much as he does in the serial version. He does show up from time to time, and every time he does, it's really fun, it's really nice, and it's kind of classic bumbling Clark Kent, and that's lovely. But he's not kind of the ace reporter, kind of, you know, driving the story as much as he was in the radio show. Superman is kind of in it a lot more. I think what's interesting in this story, it opens, when the story opens, he's very much kind of the Max Fleischer type Superman. He can leap and he can run really fast and he's quite strong. But we don't see him kind of flying, and we don't see any heat vision. I don't know, is there any mention of X-ray vision early in the story? And I suppose as you alluded to, as the story goes on, he's exposed to kryptonite for the first time. Whenever he gets exposed to kryptonite, there's a really bad smell, which I thought was interesting. We never really hear it that way or hear it described that way. It's like there's this kind of rotting metallic smell that he gets. And it made me think, I wonder, was that something they did on the radio show? I don't remember the kryptonite episodes very well. I've only listened to them like once 15 years ago, but it feels like something they would do on that, because that's how you get it. You know, they would say in dialogue, oh, and the smell is whatever. But I thought that was really interesting. But as soon as he's exposed to kryptonite, it sort of unlocks something, and he starts having visions of Jor-El and Lara, who he has not been introduced to as of yet. When he was young, he was given this Kryptonian phonograph, it's called, and it's literally a handheld radio, and there was radio signals coming out of that. And this is how he kind of learns who he is, but he kind of shuts that away. He throws it into the local lake, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it because he can't stand the idea that he isn't from Earth and that he's different in any way, and he rejects this whole side of himself for most of the story, and then it's only much later. Well, what's happened then is he starts having visions of Jor-El and Lara, and they appear to him as these kind of ugly little green men type aliens. And because he can't stand the idea that he might be an alien, so he kind of visualizes them as this. And then as the story goes on, Roberta starts getting through to him, and she starts to say, well, I think I think you might be an alien, and I think the way you're leaping and then kind of cancelling out your leap at the very end implies that you might actually be able to fly.
He's landing, when he's carrying her, there's a part where he jumps over a river and he's carrying her, and as he's landing, he softens his land.
He softens his land. And she saw a Flash... Well, it's not called Flash Gordon, but it's called something else. It's like Desmo the Destroyer or something. She saw a serial in the movies wherein an alien could fly, and it gave her the idea that, well, maybe Superman can fly. And maybe he's purposefully not flying because he doesn't want people to know that he's different. And that's... that's not right.
Yeah, she kind of comes up with the idea that he is allowing himself to be viewed as just an enhanced person, an enhanced man. People can jump, you can jump higher. People can run, you can run faster. People can lift things, you can lift more things. You're stronger. But once he starts, using laser beams and flying around the city, then he's completely removed. There's no way he's a human, and he's definitely an alien, and that's what he's worried about. And she hits the nail on the head.
Yeah, and I like the everyone kind of assumes that Superman has his unique abilities because he trained in the mystic arts in the Orient. It sounds like something from kind of pulpy cereal or like The Shadow or something like that. I love that. And then
or a super serum.
Yeah, or a mega vitamin, I think someone said. Oh, maybe you took a mega vitamin. But yeah, so finally then when Roberta gets through to him, he goes back to Smallville, and the Kents, who are still alive, thank goodness, he goes to them, and this is a lovely moment where he says, I just want you to know whatever happens next, you'll always be my parents, and you'll always be a part of me, or something like that. And they say, oh, Clark, we know that. Of course we know that. And he goes to the lake, which is called Lake Solitude, where he threw the Kryptonian phonograph all those years ago, goes into the lake, and the fortress, which looks like the Donner fortress, he goes into it, and he meets projections of Jor-El and Lara who do look like their traditional kind of Silver Age versions. And they have this lovely line, and it really, really stuck with me. They were like, Earth is so important to who you are, and it'll always be part of you, but so will we. And they hug him. And I was like, in that moment, I was like, this is Jean Luen Yang saying, kind of inverting the John Byrne version of Superman, where he said it was Krypton that made me Superman, it's Earth that made me human. This is going against that version in the best way, I think. It's like, these are both part of your heritage, and you should embrace them both equally, and that's beautiful, and there's nothing wrong with that. That kind of way?
What I liked about that was how simply put it was.
Yeah.
It felt like parents talking to their child. I was never a fan of like all this kind of prophecy stuff, the father becomes the son and the son becomes the father and all this kind of stuff. Just talk to your child as if your child is there and needs comfort and needs love, and it's beautifully written. The fact that it comes from someone, from an Asian heritage living in America, you can really feel that personal connection to this story, and I love that about it. I think only somebody with his background could have written it so beautifully like that, in a way that maybe someone like me or someone else who didn't experience that couldn't understand.
It's a fair point to make, okay, and I would never, but I am going to bring up the fact that we are Irish, Alan, right? And we are a nation of immigrants, and we've emigrated to countries, particularly the UK, where we have been persecuted against, and our culture has been eroded in the same way that it is in this story. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about that as we get into kind of the Lees and what they go through and stuff like that, because I think that's an important point to make. We are white men, which is a huge difference, but we are a people, Irish people have been an oppressed minority, especially in the UK, but also in Australia and in America, and I think it's an important point to bring up, because some of the stuff that happens to the characters in this happens to Irish people as well, or has historically happened,
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I wasn't a huge fan on my original read-through, or even on this read-through, of the aspect of him seeing himself as the alien, like the stereotypical alien. And if you look at, I think it's page 55 of the book, you can kind of see where subliminally he got that visual. He throws the comic. There's an instant where he has a flashback to a time when he was in Smallville and some bullies start picking on, maybe it's Pete Ross, maybe it's another character, and as they're beating him up and teasing him, Clark kind of floats into the air and uses his heat vision.
Yeah.
And the comics that they're reading at the time when this happens are kind of sci-fi comics, and one lands on the ground. It's called Alien Tales, and the alien on the front of it is exactly like what he sees himself and later Jor-El and Lara to look like in the book. And I thought that was very clever. But I wasn't a huge fan of the way he viewed Jor-El and Lara as those kind of alien creatures. Now, I understand what they were going for with that. You know, for all intents and purposes, they're alien to him. You know, he thinks that they're completely removed from humans and stuff. It just didn't quite work for me the way I think he intended it to work. But I totally understood where he was coming with it, and I appreciated what he was doing. You know, it was different, but it was still very strong, very good. But it didn't really sit great with me. Did you like that aspect of it?
Yeah, I liked it as a visual representation of the other, you know, and he saw them as being alien and like ugly, grotesque, you know, sci-fi movie aliens, and it was a nightmare for him to think that he could be that, you know, when in fact at the end of the story, when he finally meets them for real, they're just like him, and they're just like everyone else, and you know, and that's just a great allegory for these kinds of issues in general. You know, I think that when you get right down to it, it's just one world, Alan. I think it again, it's one of those things that a child could pick up really easily, if you get me. Like they would get the meaning of that by the end of the story.
Do you have any favorite moments in particular when it comes to the Superman character himself throughout the book?
Superman. Oh, I forgot to mention, because we'll get letters about this if we don't. Did you catch the name of the bullies that in the Smallville flashback?
I didn't. No.
So first of all, yeah, it was Pete Ross that Clark was hanging around with, reading comics and stuff like that. The bullies were Kenny Braverman and his brother. I can't remember his brother's name. Kenny Braverman is Conduit from
very good
from 90s comics, and he pops up and stuff. I think he's in Man of Steel as a bully as well, and he's definitely in the animated series as a bully in Smallville. They never actually use Conduit in anything, but they do use Kenny Braverman as kind of an old bully in Smallville a lot. So I thought that was fun.
I love the scene where his mother comes over and basically denounces Clark as being a demon spawn child to the Kents.
Well, again, very similar to Man of Steel, you know, that happened in that. Favorite moments of Superman, aside from the kind of larger character stuff, I mean, just in terms of kind of fun Superman moments, I really liked him fighting the Atom Man at the start of the story. It's just great. I loved all the moments with Kryptonite, and it's a really kind of cartoony effect that Kryptonite has on him in this version. Like his whole hand will just like swell up and turn green and all this kind of stuff. I thought that was fun. And yeah, there's just a lot of fun action. It's nice to kind of see a comic where it's much more scaled down Superman action. Like he's kind of wrestling dudes a bit more and throwing guys around and leaping and running, as opposed to and I think the implication is that he's holding back for most of the story as well, because he doesn't want people to know just how strong he is, so he kind of pretends to do these sort of George Reeves punches.
And it takes more effort. Like there's a scene where the Clan of the Fiery Cross set fire to the globe. They put a burning cross on the globe of the Daily Planet, and he has to kind of run and climb up the building, the side of the Daily Planet building, and then he gets on, say, like the Saturn rings and runs around them and uses the air to put out the fire. You know, there's a little more effort required when you can't fly and you can't use your ice breath, which I liked. I have to say my favorite moment was the very end, when he has the discussion with Matt Riggs in the air after, you know, when he flies up with him, and Matt Riggs has gone to a baseball game at the end of it. You know, he's kind of been cut off from everybody. The rest of the Clan of the Fiery Cross are in prison. He turns up at this Unity House baseball game where everybody's obviously playing baseball, and Tommy Lee is there, and his nephew Chuck Riggs is there, and he's got a bomb, and Superman catches him and flies him up into the air and freezes the bomb. And Matt Riggs turns around and he says, "You've been brainwashed by corrupt newspapers and textbooks, Superman. The Lees aren't your own. You share no blood with them, no history. There is literally nothing that binds you together. That has been the Klan's point all along. A nation bound by nothing cannot last." To which Superman responds, "But we are bound together. The Lees and I, our friends at the Daily Planet, the Unity House, and the police department, everyone down there really, we are bound together by the future. We all share the same tomorrow. And I think that's absolutely...
That's amazing.
Amazing. So simply put, you know, we all have fears. We all have families that we worry about. We all have children that we love. We all, you know, hope for the best for our own for tomorrow. And, you know, that's what joins us together. We're all on this floating rock in the middle of space. And tomorrow's not guaranteed for any of us. And all we have is each other. And I just think that is absolutely superbly written.
And that is the argument that a lot of those guys will use, by the way. A lot of the time they will go, a nation bound by nothing is, you know, is whatever the line is. Like, you hear that all the time. You see it in Facebook comments all the time. And it's nonsense, you know, that kind of way. So, yeah, no, that is a fantastic moment. I love that.
I have to say, something that I really enjoy about comic books in general. I love reading Superman books. I love reading Batman books. I love reading books that, if those characters weren't in them, the supporting characters alone would sustain me, because their story is so interesting and their character arcs are so interesting. And if Superman was not in Superman Smashes the Klan, and it was just about this, you know, Chinese American family moving from Chinatown into Metropolis and, you know, encountering this hate group and everything they go through, and the story of Roberta Lee, who I want to talk about now, I would still think that this comic book is absolutely superb. And Roberta Lee is such a fantastic heroine, I think. She's I don't want to say she's a mini Lois Lane or a Cub reporter Lois Lane. She is that. Yeah, they are comparable. There is a lot of character traits that both her and Lois share. And, you know, Lois even kind of takes her on as a protege towards the end of the story. But just this little girl, you know, she's part of this Chinese-American family. They move from Chinatown into Metropolis. She's worried about leaving, you know, her friends and everything she knows in Chinatown to move into the big city. Tommy is very excited about it. And she's so strong-willed that when this hate group turns up, they turn up first by lighting a burning cross in the garden of the Lee's house. And she's so strong, like she's never... Maybe she is afraid, you know, when she encounters these people and their ignorance and their racism, but she never shows it. She always does the right thing. She's always just, you know, a very strong-willed character. Yeah. She's so well written, and I thought her story throughout the entire book just kept me engaged. I thought she was such an intriguing character. What did you think about Roberta Lee?
Oh, I thought she was great, and you know, she had a lot of interesting kind of human flaws and foibles about her. Like she has a weak stomach,
yeah,
and
a gurgly stomach. She calls it,
a gurgly stomach, and like when you know, and that's part of the seminal moment where she realizes that Superman is softening his landings because he doesn't want to upset her stomach. Like it's the whole thing.
Yeah, and
you know, there's this lovely moment that happens where, you know, that they've moved schools because they've moved to Metropolis from Chinatown. They've moved to a different district, and she runs into two girls from her old school, and one of them doesn't want to talk to her, and she said, "Oh, she never liked me. Well, what's her problem?" And she was like, "Oh, well, you know, you never wanted to come play with us or something like that." And she was like, "Oh yeah, because of my gurgly stomach." And she was like, well, I think she just thought you were better than us. You know, and it just speaks to, I think he's making a point there about how people jump to conclusions with people of different races. And that's one of the kind of the quieter moments of ignorance that we can be guilty of. And then there's another moment then when she kind of is making friends at the new school. And there's this one little girl who kind of keeps saying things like, "Oh, you know, you Chinese are so wise and you Chinese are so brave and you always know what to do, you great Chinese people." And again, it's like her heart is in the right place, but that's also a form of ignorance, you know, that kind of way. And and Roberta, it's through Roberta that we see all these different forms. Like we see obviously Chuck Riggs and Matt and the more kind of vengeful, violent form of it, but then you see all these smaller versions of it as well. And it's like, well, Jesus, well, maybe I'm guilty of that, you know, that kind of way. And like I think that's great for kids to read too, you know, because again, it doesn't beat you over the head about it. It just sort of naturally evolves over the course of the story.
And she's smart as a whip. Like, it's her who cops during all this action at the house when Matt and Chuck Riggs turn up. Obviously, Chuck Riggs isn't I like how he's depicted. He's depicted, yes, he says racist things during the baseball game when Tommy Lee turns up at the Unity House baseball game and is just a better pitcher, a stronger pitcher than he is. And there's a little bit of an incident where Chuck Riggs doesn't listen and he ends up getting injured. And, he uses a derogatory term when it comes to Tommy Lee. But then when we next see him, he's sitting on his porch and he's regretting it. And he understands that he was wrong. And he tries to explain that to Matt Riggs, his uncle, who has taken him and the mother in since we presume the father passed away. And, Matt Riggs kind of does what a normal father or father figure would do in that situation to begin with and tries to play it down until he learns that it was Tommy Lee, the new immigrant family from the new immigrant family who moved into town that did it. And then he turns it. And he just, you can see how the hate is bred from generation to generation. It was just an accident, Uncle Matt. No, it wasn't. He tried to kill you. He tried to replace you. This is the problem with this country,
Yeah. Did you notice, though, when he said, I bet he had a name like Kowalski or something Steen or O'Malley? So he's listing off the things that he's prejudiced against, one of which obviously being Irish people. Hello.
Well, none of us like those O'Malleys, Rob. None of us like
those
O'Malleys.
None of us like those O'Malleys, of course. But I thought that was, and I don't recall that being a thing in the serial. I think they were specifically just racist towards the Chinese in that one. But
Roberta, while the cross is being set on fire, she notices that one of the people in the Klan robes is wearing the red boots that Chuck was wearing at the baseball game earlier, because Chuck is a massive Superman fan.
Yeah.
Loves Superman, wears the Superman t-shirt, wears red boots because he can be like Superman, and she notices the boots, and that leads them to kind of making that connection between him and later on his uncle. Love all that. Like she's smart as a whip. Really just enjoy that character. I just thought I'd love to see more from her. I was very impressed with the writing there when it came to, and the only thing in terms of the Lees I was a little bit iffy about. I thought the father and mother were a little bit underdeveloped.
Yeah, that's fair. I thought that too. Yeah.
The mother doesn't have a name as such, Mrs. Lee. The father obviously does have a name. He's a doctor. Well, they refer to him as Dr. Lee. One thing I did find very interesting was the father's own racism when it came to Inspector Henderson and his buddies turning up at the house. He's out socialising with his friends, it appears, and he comes on the scene after the Ku Klux Klan, the Clan of the Fiery Cross, have left. And him and his buddies hop out of their truck. They're all African Americans to help the Lees. Dr. Lee, Roberta and Tommy Lee's father, automatically assumes that they're troublemakers and kind of tells them to leave. And it's only when Inspector Henderson kind of puts on his badge and his coat that he realises he's part of the police department. And it just goes to show that it's not all, and air quote, black and white, no pun intended. That there's layers to the discrimination and the racism within even those communities. And I thought that was really well addressed there. I don't remember anything like that in the radio show either.
Absolutely. And another thing, just Tommy Lee, that there's a moment in the story, after he's been attacked and everything else, and he's now really popular at school because he's such a good pitcher, I guess, and everybody loves him for it. And he's talking about how his family were attacked, and he starts leaning into stereotypes. And like he has, I don't even know if I should be saying it. Like he describes something in such a way that he's using a derogatory term, but it's just interesting. It's like, and that's not okay either. Like that doesn't help anyone either. And
Roberta is disgusted by him.
Yeah, she is.
Like she takes that. Yeah, because what he's doing is he's kind of trying to meet them halfway and ingratiate himself.
Yes.
By being self-deprecating. And, obviously that's a defense mechanism and a coping mechanism when you're dealing with this kind of thing. You want to ingratiate yourself with the group that you're in. But Roberta has no time for that in any way, shape or form. And you can see then why, to your point earlier, her friends could see her then as being standoffish. Like he's there, he's laughing, he's chatting with them. She's sitting over in the corner with a scowl on her face.
Yeah.
It would be easy to see that as being a chip on her shoulder.
I think that does exist in a much smaller way in Irish society and being Irish abroad and that kind of thing. So in Ireland, a lot of people have Irish names that use the Irish language, right? Which is not the same type of language as English. So a lot of the vowels and the consonants work in different ways, right? One of those Irish names is Saoirse, which is my fiance's name. It's the Irish word for freedom, okay? When she's dealing with people in the UK, they frequently can't say her name, and they'll say things like, "Why can't you have a normal name?" You know, and I have friends that have even more elaborate Irish names. You know, names like Sive and Maeve and Quiva, like plenty of names that use consonants in ways that are not familiar to people who only speak English, and they're like, "Oh, how come the names because the letters work completely differently in different languages." It's a thing. Look it up. But what happens then is people take on English names and they just say, right, I'm not going by Quiva anymore, I'm going by Carol, or I'm not going by Saoirse anymore, I'm going by Sharon, and Irish people move abroad and they'll lose their accent because they're like, I'm fed up with being made fun of all the time, so it is a thing, and it happens even for people like us who are, to all intents and purposes, we blend in more. It's not as immediately apparent, but it's just something to, and that happens later on in the story. We find out that Roberta and the rest of the family have all changed their names. So Roberta's actual name is Lin Shin Lee. So she has the iconic Superman LL initials. I just thought that was an important point to make. Like that is still happening. The people are made fun of for their names or the spelling of their name or the pronunciation or whatever it is, or accents.
You see it regularly when you watch like American late night talk shows.
Yeah.
And they have like Saoirse Ronan on.
Yeah.
And there's always this eye rolling thing where they have to spend 10 minutes talking about her name as if it's the Da Vinci Code or something. Like it's just banana stuff that in this day and age we're still doing that in terms of
they'll do this big 15-minute long sketch about how funny it is and how we're all leprechauns and that we all dance around with shillelaghs, and it's just like, do you not realize? Like, I don't know. It makes me mad, guys. I'm not gonna lie, but and it's just, it all stems from the same thing, and it's just so that's why this story resonated with me in that way. And by the way, we have to stress again, Ireland is a first world country. We are white people. We've been very blessed. We don't suffer the same discrimination as we once did, or the way other people do around the world. But they're very similar forms of discrimination,
I'd agree with that to a certain, but like our generation and maybe two generations before us are very blessed. But Jesus Christ, the generations before that had it very fucking had it very
not that
rough.
long ago. Like people don't realize, like in the 70s and the 80s, there was ads up in England saying no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
My father-in-law went over to the UK, to Liverpool and London back in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, and that was still going on. Chuck Riggs, any thoughts on Chuck?
No, I loved Chuck in this. As you've alluded to already, he is a complex character. He goes on a journey throughout the story. He starts off and he's the angry, jealous, and he's using the slurs and everything else. But as the story goes on, you really get the sense, and this was true of the radio serial as well, there was a sense of conflict in him. He was really struggling with what was going on. And there's a lovely moment, I don't think we've talked about it yet, there's a lovely moment later on in the story where he's like, well, maybe it's not so bad to only want to be surrounded by people of your own race and your own kind. Maybe that's not a bad thing. And you can see he's trying to, and he breaks down. He says, I don't want to accept the fact that my family are evil. He says something like that, and it's a great moment. And I think the art really conveys the conflict as well. Like we really get a sense that he's really anxious about what's going to happen. There's a scene where he knows that the Unity House is going to blow up. This also happens in the serial, I think. And you see his face is getting red, and there's like beads of sweat coming down his head. And Guru just really conveys that really, really well. And by the end of the story, then obviously he turns on Matt Riggs, and it's really powerful when he does. And you believe then that the rest of the characters would kind of embrace him as one of their friends. But yeah, no, I really, really liked him.
He convinces all the Unity House crew, Jimmy Olsen and everybody, to leave the Unity House to go to the cinema, and they go to see Captain Desmo versus Genghis Akim.
That's what it's
Flash
called.
Gordon and Ming the Merciless, basically. And obviously the Genghis Akim character is a racial stereotype. And a racial stereotype that DC themselves would often use. We saw it in the famous Studios episodes of the Fleischer cartoons only a few years before the 1946 radio serial. We see it in, you mentioned in episode 20 there, the Batman
the Batman, the serial, from 1943. But also Detectives Comics #1. There's one of those guys on the front of it, and it's disgraceful.
Yeah, his redemption arc, what I really like about his redemption arc is it's not forced. It's completely natural. You can see the conflict within him throughout the entire story. That line you said there about just, needing to know that his family are not evil hit me, like a ton of bricks. It was so well written. He has that conversation with Tommy Lee, and like you said, at the end, then he completely turns once his uncle turns up with a bomb, because he's helping the Lees and he's helping Superman to a point. He doesn't reveal the information to them straight away that his uncle is the air quote Grand Scorpion of the Clan of the Fiery Cross. So he tells them what he needs to tell them to get them out of the jams that they're in, but he doesn't tell them what they need to know in order to put a stop to the whole thing. Not until the end. And then someone throws him a baseball bat and he hits his uncle with it, and then he stands with the Lees against him. And it's very powerful because it's not one of these things that just happens out of nowhere. You can see the build up throughout his introduction, basically, when he's sitting on his porch earlier on, and he's conflicted about the way everything went down with Tommy Lee. I just thought it was really well written. Matt Riggs, on the other hand, is just an evil, racist son of a bitch from start to finish.
Yeah, he's kind of exactly the same as the radio serial. Like, even most of his dialogue feels like it was lifted, like, directly, I want to say.
Yeah, they did a great. And to be fair, if I remember correctly, the voice actor, and when it came to Chuck Riggs, to Matt Riggs, back then, you're right, I get them confused, did a great job.
He was amazing. I remember that you could hear the veins in his head about to burst. That guy, it was incredible.
It's true, like with the radio show, he takes in his sister-in-law and he takes in her son, and he acts as a father figure to the son. But then he just has this deep-seated hatred. And he is, in Stan Lee's words, a true believer, because at the end he approaches the Grand Mogul, I think it is. It's like the next guy up. And he approaches him. He's like, look, the guys are in prison. I'm on the run. I'm in bother, Grand Mogul. I need your help. And the Grand Mogul, who turns out to be one of the doctors that, spoiler alert, that Dr. Lee works for, is like, oh, you don't actually believe this nonsense, do you? And he's like, what? And he's like, all this kind of, us against them. It's all bullshit. Like, we're only doing this for the membership fees and the rope fees. He goes, which you get a cut of. And in this version, he's using that to develop kryptonite weapons to take down Superman, who he sees as the real threat. In the radio show, he's just that guy who's just spinning a yarn to make money.
You made the point, I think, when we did the radio show, that it felt a bit kind of on the nose or not quite. And I think I argued with you about it at the time. I feel like in this story, it does feel a bit on the nose. This is the only time where it did feel like a kid's story, where I was like, this is just so simplistic and boiled down to, like, I feel like him saying, oh, you don't really believe that stuff, do you? I feel like that would be more of a gentle sort of, it wouldn't happen so quickly. Like, oh no, it's all fake. We made it all up, there are layers of diffusion that would lead to that,
But it is absolutely true, though, that there are people who just spout this nonsense to make money and to gain power, and that's their whole shtick. Like, whether, if a gun was put to their head, do they honestly believe everything they say? And you made the point, I think, in episode 20 when we talked about the radio show, was, they definitely don't, because if they did, they wouldn't be contradicting themselves all the time. What damage the radio show did back in the 40s was it portrayed these people who were shrouded in this kind of mystique and this kind of anonymity as being just absolute cowards and buffoons. I like the fact that he is not an idiot. He's a smart guy. He is a calculating guy, and he's a dangerous guy. And because those guys are in this as well. And like there's a scene here where and I spoke about it in our last episode too, because it's in the radio show and they transferred it over to this, where he kidnaps Tommy Lee and they have a full-blown discussion about how they're going to pour boiling tar on him. He's a 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid, and feather him, cover him in feathers. And I'd seen references to that in, like, cartoons and nonsense when I was a kid. You don't really think about it.
Yeah.
But to actually stop and think about doing that to a child, pouring hot tar on them and then covering them in feathers. And Tommy ends up jumping into a river or falling into a river to get away and hurting his arm, and they just leave him to drown. Like, these are bad guys, like, and I don't think that should be underestimated too much. But yeah, he's a bad dude. I don't think. What are your thoughts in terms of Lois in this story? She doesn't get a lot to do.
No, not really. I mean, Clark Kent doesn't have a lot to do. Lois kind of comes in and out of the story a bit. Perry White, though, it kind of features from time to time in really interesting ways. And I guess we're going to talk about Inspector Henderson now anyway. But I'm going to let you tell this, because I think that the thing that happens with Perry and Inspector Henderson really, really stuck out to me. I thought it was really interesting.
First of all, Perry White has no time for any of this racist bullshit in this story, and I love him for it. For a guy who was probably born like in the 1880s, he has no time for it. But there's a scuffle between... so Perry White, Lois, and Inspector Henderson are kidnapped. I love the fact Inspector Henderson is in this to begin with. Obviously, that's a reference to the George Reeves show.
And the radio show.
And the radio show. And in the show, he's an African-American man. And the Ku Klux Klan, while there's a group attacking the Unity House to set it on fire, there's also a group who've gone to the Daily Planet. They've kidnapped Perry, Lois, and Inspector Henderson, and they bring him back. And again, you know, it's just blatant racism where they call him boy and all this kind of stuff, and they're going to torture them or kill them. And Superman turns up and everything is fine. And then there's a moment that really struck me where they're standing outside and they're loading the Ku Klux Klan. I keep saying Ku Klux Klan, the Klan of the Fiery Cross guys, into the back of a truck. And Perry White picks up Inspector Henderson's badge. And it's all beaten to shit. It got just, damaged during the scuffle. And Perry turns to him and he says, "Inspector, I found this on the ground. It got pretty banged up." And Henderson replies, "I worked so hard for this." And Perry responds, "The department will replace it for you, I'm sure." And Henderson says, "Yeah, but that could take weeks." Perry answers, "It's just a badge, Inspector. It's not what makes you a police officer." Henderson replies, "Unfortunately not. Everyone in Metropolis sees it that way, Mr. White." As a police officer myself and a cop myself, I've had my badge since 2005. I carry it in my pocket wherever I go. But it is something that, look, it is a piece of tin or a piece of metal or whatever it's made of. But it is something that carries meaning to a police officer. It's what you've dedicated, many years of your life to. It's just a symbol of, I suppose, your dedication and your duty and your authority to a certain extent, especially when you're in plainclothes like I am and you need to use it practically every day to identify yourself. And Inspector Henderson has worked very hard to get that badge, especially back in the 1940s as an African-American man. And it's the symbol of it to him has also been destroyed. He needs that more than the white cop on the street does. But he needs that to kind of give himself that authority in that world.
If he's not wearing that, people just look at him as another black man. Whereas when he's wearing that, it just changes his whole image in people's eyes, and he's constantly aware of that in a way that, as you say, that the white cop wouldn't be.
We find out throughout the story that there is a police officer in the Clan of the Fiery Cross, and he allows Matt Riggs to escape. And when everything is kicking off, he pulls a gun on Inspector Henderson and says, "Is that you, boss? You all look the same when you're not wearing your badge." Just blatant racism. I like my badge is important to me. Most, cops, it's important to them in a certain respect, whatever. But it's vital to Inspector Henderson, because without it, he's just a black man. And that's all they see him as. And that really struck me, I thought.
Yeah, and to pick up on the thing the guy says, that you all look the same without your badge, that could have been the excuse he would give after he had shot him dead, and he might have gotten away with it,
But it was just a moment, like, there was a lot of silliness there for a while, and then, like, these guys are bad guys, like I said earlier on. They're going to torture these people. The way they're talking to them is shocking. And then you just get this brief one-on-one moment with Perry White and Inspector Henderson. It just kind of took me out of it for a minute, where I was like, whoa.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and to your point, like, Inspector Henderson is, I love when he pops up in these things. It's so much fun to talk about him, and it's great to get your perspective on them. I have to mention, and this is a much lighter mention, by the way, I was on Anthony's podcast recently, another exciting episode of The Adventures of Superman, and we were talking about an episode called Blackmail from season 4, I want to say. And I really want you to watch that one, because it's a very Inspector Henderson centric episode, and some really cool kind of cop stuff happen in it, and I think you'd really enjoy it. So I'd love to get your take on that.
I'll absolutely check that out. Yeah. So is there anything else character wise you want to chat about before we move on?
Not really. Lois, as we said, is not really a major player in this. She is in it a couple of significant times. She gives Lin Shin Lee, as we find out her real name is, she gives her this lovely pen at the end of the story, and it's got her actual initials engraved in it. I just thought that was really, really nice. Jimmy is also, like, he does feature a lot in the story, but he basically serves the exact same purpose he did in the radio serial. He is in charge of the Unity House baseball team. He's there as kind of an older brother figure for Tommy Lee and some of the young characters. And sometimes he kind of helps Superman out and stuff like that. But yeah, like as you said, like, you know, Superman is a pretty big character in this. Most of the other major characters are, you know, the Lees and the Riggs, and then Inspector Henderson will be a very strong supporting character. The actual, you know, central cast of Superman, they are all here, and it's lovely to see them. And they probably have more to do than they do in a lot of modern comics, to be honest. But yeah, they're not really major players in this story, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, it's fine.
In terms of Superman himself and say Roberta and Tommy and the Lee family, it's quite empowering. It's that your difference isn't something to hide. It ends up being your strength and your superpower. And, you know, we see that in literal terms with Superman at the end of the story, but we see it also, say, with Roberta Lee towards the end, where she's a cub reporter now for the Daily Planet. You know, she's using her skills. She's been kind of emboldened by Lois with the gift of the pen and stuff. And she's the one who solves the mystery at the end in relation to, you know, the kryptonite and all that stuff. And Superman's capabilities and his untapped potential. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Can we talk about the art a little bit more before we push on?
Yeah.
It's when I originally saw it, I was like, oh, it looks a little bit kiddie to me, and it's not a style that I generally love, that kind of anime manga kind of style of art, which I know is hugely popular. I just didn't really grow up with it. But I have to say, reading it twice this week, I absolutely love it. I thought it's deceptively cheerful. It's bright. It's colourful. You know, like I said, it's kind of this manga-inspired style. But I think the contrast really, really works. And I think it'll help to pull in younger readers while delivering the really heavy, serious themes as well. I just think it's a superb effort by Goro Hiro to make this accessible to a younger audience. I think it's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'm similar. I haven't fully cracked the world of anime and manga as of yet. It is something I'd like to try and understand more, because, man, if you go into bookshops or even comic shops nowadays, it's like manga is taken over. It is more popular than American comics.
Absolutely. I could not, when I was in Dublin that day that I met you for the pint, man, I was in 2 comic book shops in Dublin city centre. I could not get over the amount of manga that was in there.
I remember speaking to a comic shop owner years ago, and he said that people kept coming in saying, you know, do you sell manga here? And he said, no, we are a shop that sells American comic books. We don't sell manga. And if you go into his shop now, man, I can tell you there's a lot more manga there now. You know, don't sell that stuff at your peril. That flies off the shelves in a way that American stuff just doesn't anymore. So I absolutely understand why they would want to, you know, push it in that direction. And also just culturally, given the context of this story and the writer involved, it makes sense that it would have that kind of art style, that influence. It when you look at it at first glance, you do think, oh, this is for kids, you know. Even more so than maybe other manga would. Like, it has a very kind of friendly, cuddly look about it, I suppose you'd say. But at the same time, to your point, like, what I love about it is it's very expressive. Like, there's a whole range of emotions that they get across in the artwork. And that's not always something you get in the more Americanized stuff. And I always like that. Like, the artwork can be simple, it can be silly, it can be ugly, it can be whatever. If you can make me believe that a character is feeling nervous or anxious or happy or sad or silly or, you know, hopeful or whatever, if you can show me a range of different things, then I'll buy into it. And I'm thinking of these panels where Chuck Riggs is, you know, he's really, really anxious. He wants to get the guys out of the Unity House because he knows it's going to blow, and he doesn't want them to die. And you know, all these complex emotions he's going through, and you can see that in his face in those panels. I think that's great. And also, you know, purely on a silly fanboy level, Superman flying and using his powers in this looks great and looks really, really cool, and it's conveyed really, really well, you know. So yeah, big fan of the artwork in this.
Even the emotions, I'm just looking at it here, the emotions like the hatred that Matt Riggs experiences, or the joy that Roberta, there's a beautiful scene, I don't think we spoke about it, there's a beautiful scene where Superman gives Roberta his cape, and you can just see the pure joy on her face, and there's a beautiful scene then where her mother sews it into a jacket for her, which I just think is astounding. But it's, looking at it here, it's a really warm comic book, like all the Smallville scenes, really earthly kind of tones and stuff, and just a really light kind of way of approaching it that I just really found endearing and easy to follow, and it's just a really beautiful book, I think.
I'm going to nitpick one very small thing. I don't know if you noticed this. There is a panel in the comic near kind of the back half of it, like a mid shot of Superman. So it's from his kind of his pectorals up is the shot of him, right? And the S is back to front. It's like Bizarro's S. It's the wrong way around. Sometimes when they make those mistakes, they fix them in the trade. So I was reading it on the DC Universe app, and on the app it's the original issues that they have. It's not the trade.
You don't know what page it is by any chance, do you? Just so I can take a look.
Oh man, I don't. I'll find it and I'll put it on the socials, and we can talk about it another time. But there definitely is a panel where his S is the wrong way around, and it was slightly annoying. But I would hazard a guess that they probably fixed it by the time they released the trade. Yeah.
I always laugh when you see that in like the old Batman cartoons, where like the black bat and the yellow surround swap and stuff like that. It always drives me nuts.
There's a bit in like Batman meets Scooby-Doo from the early 70s, and it's like it'll cut to a shot of Batman and Robin, and both Batman and Robin will have like their bare legs on show, because you know the way like classic Robin, he's just wearing the little green undies like, and like Batman is just wearing blue undies, and his legs are just,
that's because it's party time, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, the message of this book is highly relevant in 2025. It was obviously hugely relevant in the 1940s, and I read the part at the back of the book. I don't know if you want to call it an epilogue as such, but where Gene spoke himself about the racism that he encountered growing up, and the racism in America that existed throughout the generations and that. And it was a very powerful read. I thought he spoke especially about an incident that has obviously stuck with him when he experienced racism firsthand, kind of offhand racism by a pupil in his school, which I thought was very moving. But do you think that there's room for more kind of books of this nature in the Superman mythology? Do you think like Superman could kind of go back to being that social justice warrior that he was in the 1940s? Do you think that is a direction that writers could go more often?
I wish they would. Absolutely, at 10,000 million %. I love these kinds of stories. I wish there was so many more, Superman social allegory type stories, or, being a champion of the oppressed, journalism centric stuff, human interest centric stuff. I think it's tricky trying to sell that to people who just want to watch flying and shooty powers. And now this book, to its credit, has a nice balance of that stuff. It really, it serves both masters in that regard, and I think that's great. But I think, and unfortunately, there is a very large contingent of people who will spout things like, oh, go woke, go broke, keep the politics out of all that nonsense. Like, Superman is built on a foundation of that stuff, guys. Just like Star Trek, just like Star Wars, by the way, also. So I think it's just lovely. And I would say as well that, like, this is not a sad story. This is a very happy, hopeful story, and it looks at these issues of racism and intolerance, and it shows us that there is a complex spectrum there, and there's a lot of lessons we can learn, and they are good lessons to learn. And they're, we will continue to learn new lessons about all this stuff, and that's okay, and the point Superman made about the we're all part of the same tomorrow, it's so relevant, it was relevant then, it's relevant now, and I think that's beautiful. That's one of the best things this character can do. And the fact that he is an immigrant, he was created by people that came from a persecuted background. He is an immigrant. He embodies all the ideals that America is supposed to represent and doesn't. And that's lovely. And there are so many amazing things you can do with it. And I would love them to do more with that, and I hope they do, and I'm sure they will in some way, shape, or form, even if it isn't in the really big, top level type stories that are coming out in the movies and stuff like that. You never know, they might do stuff like that in the movies eventually. Like that, I was very, going back to when we started the podcast and we weren't sure if they'd ever do a Superman movie again. For a while there, Ta-Nehisi Coates was going to do a Superman movie, or was writing a Superman movie set in the 60s where he was going to be a black man. And I was like, I don't know what that's going to be, but I really want to see it. So there's loads of interesting avenues you could go here. Whether it works in the world of Warner Brothers Discovery and David Zaslav and all these big corporate interests and stuff like that, I don't know. But I absolutely would love to see more stuff like this, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think in a time when racial tension and xenophobia are sadly still around to the extent that they are, I think this book couldn't have been more timely. I mean, Superman's stand against the Klan, we'd love it to just be history, but it's not. It's a reminder of what I think Superman and other superheroes at their best represent, and characters like Roberta Lee and Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen and Perry White. This is them at their very best, I think. And what I like about this is you don't have to know anything about the radio serial. You don't need to know anything about the real life history of the story. You don't need to know anything about previous Superman books, continuity, any of that. You can walk into your comic book store, you can go on to Amazon, whatever you want to do, and you can purchase this and sit down and just read it from page 1 on, and you will have a very, very clear image of what Superman is and what the characters in that world are, and you can decide then whether you want to move on and read more or not. Or even if you're just a fan of the character who has never checked this book out, I highly recommend that you do. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I meant to bring this up somewhere, and I think, why not bring it up here? Remember the Superman episode of Lois and Clark where he fights the Nazis?
Do I remember it? I featured on the Lois and Clark episode where I discussed it with Matt Truex. Super, as I referred to it, Superman.
Just to continue the point you were making there, like there's a lovely moment at the very end of that episode where Clark and Jimmy are they're nearly high-fiving each other, going, "Oh yeah, Superman really showed those Nazis what's what." That's the end of that chapter type stuff. And Perry just has this somber moment where he was like, well, do you know this councilman guy that I knew for 20 years just turned out to be a Nazi? Like, do you know how horrible that is? And it's just proof that this is not just this thing that we can just punch and it just goes away and we can have a beer about afterwards and it's over then. Like, we always have to be vigilant about this stuff, and it unfortunately is always going to keep cropping back up and stuff like that, and we just have to be vigilant and learn from each other and talk about these things a bit, and I think that's an important lesson that even that goofy show from the 90s was able to tell. So I thought it was nice to bring that up.
So yeah, folks, so that's another episode of All Star Superfan. I hope you really enjoyed that chat there about Superman Smashes the Klan. As we said, we highly recommend you check it out. Anything else, Rob, before we wrap up?
Nothing much, man. I guess I'll just see you on the other side at this stage.
See you on the other side. I can't believe we're actually here. I can't believe it. We're about to sit down with a bucket full of popcorn. Are you going to get one of those fancy schmancy popcorn buckets in your
It's
IMAX
like
cinema?
I'm not planning to, but if I see one there, it's like, oh, maybe. Depending on, there's a whole bunch of different ones. There's one that looks like one of those newspaper dispensers. I genuinely would like to just have that anyway. Like, that's kind of cool. There's one that's just a big giant S logo that lights up, I think. Like, I'd absolutely
That's
get
cool.
that.
Looks like it can hold feck all popcorn.
Yeah,
though.
probably.
I want me a big bag. I'm going large, baby.
Yeah.
I'm going large
Super
for Superman. So everybody, be sure to get in contact with us. We're at All Star Superfan on Facebook and Instagram, at All Star Superpod on Twitter. We're on the Inside All Star Superfan Facebook group if you want to join and have a lot of discussions with us about various topics, including Superman Smashes the Klan. At allstarsuperpod@gmail.com if you want to send in your voicemails or emails. We'd love to hear your thoughts about Superman Smashes the Klan or anything else we've spoken about over the last few months, or anything that just pops into your head in relation to Superman or the movie, or your thoughts on it, anything like that. Just be sure to get in contact with us. We're also on SpeakPipe. You can leave your audio messages there. Rob, am I forgetting anything?
No, that all sounds good to me. Check out the Facebook group. Leave us a voice message. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you.
We'll be back in the next few days, I'd imagine, by the time this drops, with an episode about our thoughts and feelings on James Gunn's Superman Legacy, not Legacy, Superman 25, whatever you want to call it. So until next time, folks, stay safe, stay super, and take care of each other out there. Bye-bye. So, Rob, in episode 20, we spoke at length in relation to the Clan of the Fiery Cross, the seminal 1946 radio 16-part event in which Superman took on the Clan of the Fiery Clocks. Fiery Clocks? In which Superman took on...
the Clock King.
In which Superman took on the Clan of the Fiery... oh my God, I was going to say Cocks. I'm editing that out.
Welcome back to the Superman porn party.
In which Superman took on the Clan of the Fiery Cross, the DC Comics version of the oh my God, what is going on with me? Hang on.
Leave all this in. Leave all of this in.